So this series we're in called Ordinary People. And so the idea that God can use ordinary people to do extraordinary things, and as we're going to really specifically talk about this morning, I would say ordinary people with a past, or with baggage, or bad decisions, or moral failures, God can make extraordinary, can use them for extraordinary things. So I've been at River Tree for 27 years, and it's been a long time. Yeah, it's been a fantastic journey. I never imagined I would come back to Northeast Ohio. I was born here, and it has been so good. Like, God's been amazing to us. I've been married for 27 years. I have 4 beautiful daughters, 16, 14, twins that are 12, and that's been an adventure. And so it's been so good. And so this morning, as we kind of jump in, we're going to be in the book of 2 Samuel, which might be a little tricky to find. In the paperback Bibles that are underneath the end of your rows, there it's page 247. If you want to grab one of those, use a Bible app online or on your phone, you can do that. 2 Samuel chapter 11 is where we're going to actually be. So Tuesday of this week, I was driving home. I was about 15 miles from my house, driving home. I'm on the phone. I was on a hands-free call, so the phone's in my hand, and I'm talking. Listen, I'm in this section of the road, this probably 2-mile section that was 35 miles an hour. So I'm very careful because this spot gets patrolled heavily. They have one of those digital flashing signs that tells you the miles per hour you're going. So I'm driving, watching my speedometer, and I see this light blue 80s Corvette come up behind me. And he's looking impatient, and he finally shoots around me doing about 55 and a 35. And then I catch up to him at the next light, which is only like a half a mile away. So he didn't really gain anything. But he turns around and gives me like the most profound finger I have ever gotten in my life of driving. Like 10 seconds in the air, clear in his back window. I mean, like, he is really trying to give it to me. And I'm thinking, honestly, at this moment, I have no idea what I did. I don't know if he thought it was a 45. It was actually a 35. No clue. I have no idea what I did. Now, if you go back in other parts of my driving history, I have all kinds of issues. So I've backed into cars. I've backed into my own car in my own driveway. At one point, I was on a 4-lane highway with multiple traffic lights within about a mile and a half. And I was sitting at a red light, and the light turned green, and I took off, and I looked back, and there's no one behind me. Like, all the traffic I was with at the light stayed there. I was like, Turns out I had seen the green light in the light ahead of me and took off. Like, I could have been T-boned, like, really easily. Then one time when I was younger, I was about 17, I was coming home with a trailer on the back of my truck and my dad's tractor in it, and the trailer, I had not hooked it up right. It broke loose. Jerked left, right, ripped off the truck into a ditch, flipped upside down. So, like, I've got all kinds of automotive failure. Now, then you take that, so that's just the automotive list. So what about all the other areas of my life that I'm not going to disclose to you this morning? But I got plenty of things that when I think back on, I cringe, or I'm ashamed, or like there's something back there that I go, oh, man. Like, why did that happen? Why did I do that? And then if you're not careful, one of the things that can happen is you can actually take that and go, ooh, because of that thing, God could never, like, here's what some people do, like out there when they misunderstand who God is, that he is for them, they don't know that, they think, oh, because of that thing, God will never take me back, which is a lie from hell. Because the God of the God of the Bible is the God pictured sitting on his front porch, looking at the horizon, waiting for us to come back home, like no matter who you are or what you've done. Such incredible news. But then if you're not careful, one of the things that can happen to us is once you maybe come back or you're on your way back, you look back at some of those things that make you cringe. You're like, oh, in your past, and oh, I can't believe I did that. That was a dark part of my life. And you look at that thing and you're like, oh, because of that, God could never use me to turn back out into the world and help people love God and love people and help people win. God could never use me because. So what I'd love you to think about this morning is what's the end of that sentence for you? Like, I have this sneaking suspicion God could never use me really because. Or maybe he'll only do this with me in the kingdom. I can do this surface level thing or these little things in the kingdom, but God could never really use me to impact people, make a difference, be an influence because of this. If you knew what was in my past, you'd know God could never use me. Well, the amazing thing is God's not just in the business of rescuing people with baggage and a past and things they think are unforgivable, but he's also in the business of taking those same people, ordinary people like us, and making us, if we will submit and surrender to him, making us extraordinary. And people who shouldn't even be in the game, like all-star players, making a difference. And that's you. And you might even still be sitting here listening to the last 5 minutes and go, yeah, but if you knew my stuff, you would know. No. Also a lie from hell. All right, so 2 Samuel chapter 11 is where we're going to be. It's starting in verse 1. And so this thought of I'm not good enough, or my past isn't strong enough or clean enough, and I'm just an ordinary person. You know, I've felt like this kind of my whole life. Anybody know the movie Rudy? You seen the movie Rudy? It's kind of an older movie. Yeah. Guy was a walk-on for Notre Dame, little guy, and there's a point in the movie where one of the adults is trying to encourage him, and he's like, he was thinking about quitting. He's like, you're 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing, and you barely have a speck of athletic ability. Like, that's the way I've felt about my whole life. Like, you're 5 foot nothing, in my case, like 170 and nothing, and I have a speck of talent. Like, how could I do anything? And this has been my predominant thought in the back of my mind was so much of my life. Like, how could God use me? Because I just don't measure up. And so part of the gift I think he wants to give you is he wants to take you, rescue you, no matter who you are, what you've done, and then turn you around and send you back into the game in like a way that might even surprise you. You go, oh my, he's going to use me for that? Yes. So, story of David. He's one of the kings of Israel. You might know that in the Old Testament, God's chosen nation of Israel. Huge section in the Old Testament devoted to him, over a huge number of chapters in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. And so this story, while he's famous for the story of David and Goliath when he's a boy, and he's a king, so you might go, oh, he's not that ordinary because he's a king. He's not like me. Well, I'll give you that. But the problem is the other story he's most famous for after the David and Goliath story is not a good one. It's a huge moral failure. In fact, it's a compound list of moral failures that are in David's biography, his resume, and yet before and after, one of the phrases used to talk about David is that he's actually known as a man after God's own heart. Like, how in the world could both of those things be true? So I want to we're going to look at the story, and you might know it, you might not know it. It's okay either way. It is the story out of this chapter 11, 2 Samuel. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army, but David remained in Jerusalem. There's a slight warning flag even in that opening verse, sentence. So typically in this time, if you were the king of a nation, you would lead your army out into battle. So for him to stay home and send somebody else in charge, the guy's name is Joab, somebody he trusted, I'm assuming, sends him out, David stays home. Slight flag, could be like, oh, something's not right already. Verse 2. One evening, David got up from his bed, walked around on the roof of his palace, From the roof, he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. So not uncommon for someone to bathe on their rooftop, typically a safe place, but the palace in a city would typically have been the highest place. So I'm sure David knows this. He's out taking a walk one night. Maybe it had already entered his mind. He already knew it was going to happen. He sees her bathing. Verse 3. David sent somebody to find out about her. So he's walking around, sees this naked woman on the rooftop, brings in his servant, go find out about her. Now, there's a chance this woman, Bathsheba, is bathing on the rooftop. Maybe she knows the king can see her. Maybe she's trying to start something. Don't know that. What you do know clearly from the story is David makes this move. He makes a decision. And if you know any of the other parts of David's story, he's already got dozens, if not hundreds, of wives and concubines at this point. Also not God's original plan. So he's got, why do you think he wants to add to his harem? He wants more mother-in-laws? Wouldn't that'd be fun? Yeah. So David's got all the sex and passion he could possibly want, and it's still not enough. And this is the way sin actually works. So I can get what I think I want, but then it'll never be enough, and then I'll have to go get more, and then I'll have to go get more. All sin works like this, and it's why it's a trap. It sucks you in. It combines with your own bad decision-making, and then it pulls you in. So David makes this move. So he calls in the servant. I want you to go check out this woman down there. Tell me about her. The servant says to him, this is verse 4. Sorry, back up above there, verse 3. Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Hey, David, she's married. You should know better. Like one last warning shot across the bow. Where God often does this, he'll give you one last out before you make the final bad decision. And you can take it or not take it. David doesn't take the way out. He presses on. Verse 4, David sent messengers to get her. And then just one simple sentence. He came to him and he slept with her. This woman comes to the palace. Again, you don't know a lot of details. He has sex with her right there that night. So 30 minutes, 60 minutes, hour and a half, 2 hours. Fun, pleasure, exciting. And then it's over. All sin has this, has a short-term rush to it. And here's what you should never do. You should not pretend that's not real. A lot of Christians pretend that there's no rush in that initial there is. That third piece of cake tastes amazing. Right? Sex, money, drugs, pleasure, like whatever. Pick your deal. The short-term rush is real, it's there, but it's short-term. Then you got to wake up and go, uh-oh. Now what? It's the now what that is hidden from you early on. This is like the satanic blinding of human beings, where I can go, ooh, that looks amazing. That car, it's only $359 a month for 72 months. It's going to be amazing. I can picture myself headed down the road, sunroof's open. Month 2 comes, and you're like, uh-oh, there's the bill. Ooh, that's a big number. That's going to sting. In year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Sin always has that short-term rush. And there's always that point in which you rationalize it, which David might have done, you don't know. Like, oh, I'm the king, I deserve this. Or, oh, I've had a long day, I deserve that 3rd, 4th, 5th beer. Or whatever, name your thing. I'm going to rationalize it so I can actually get what I want. That short-term rush looks really, really, really good. I'm going to clear everything out of my life so I can go get that. And then the phrase that's out of the New Testament even more comes into play, which is a real simple farmer analogy. You will reap what you sow. Real simple, but can that sting? And you think back on the mistakes you've made, some of them maybe in this moral category of like doing things God doesn't want you to do, that he hates, that he never set up human beings to do, one of which is to commit adultery and have sex outside of marriage. And you think back and you're like, oh man, that was fun, but now all these consequences that now roll out, one of which is the broken relationship with your Father in heaven. The long-term consequences always exceed the short-term rush, which David's about to figure out and see. As somebody said, these three phrases about sin are always true. Sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, cost you more than you want to pay. Verse 5. Bathsheba conceived, sent word to David saying, I'm pregnant. So we've all got stuff like this in our past that started out like, I want that. That looks attractive. I can see the rush. I'm going to run after that. And then like something turns around and bites us. Any of you know the game Spoons? The game Spoons? The card game of Spoons? So we play this. It's like my wife and I and our kids, we play Spoons sometimes. We played it on New Year's Eve one time with a group of adults. And spoons, you're like, spoons, it's kind of an anemic kind of a game. But we play with plastic spoons, which is probably not the best move. But spoons, if you don't know it, it's a card game and you get the right cards. And pretend there's 8 people around the table. There's only 7 spoons in the middle. And at one point, everybody has to rush and grab a spoon. And then if you don't get a spoon, you're out. So, like spoons, it's a card game. It's a violent card game. So we've left spoons with gashes in our arms, and broken utensils, and like you start spoons, you're like, we're playing cards. No, we're warriors in a battle. But that's the way sin actually works too. You're like, it's just this little thing, this innocent thing, this anemic thing. And then on the backside, you're cut, you're wounded, you're damaged, you're hurt. You're left with long-term consequences you never would have seen coming. Like when you see an ad for a Dairy Queen Blizzard, you never see the calorie count in big letters, and you never see how much exercise you'd have to do on the other end to actually work that off. Large DQ cookie dough Blizzard, 1,300 calories. Isn't that like 3/4 of the daily allowance for a human being? Then, 1,300 calories, you'd actually have to jog 11 miles to burn that off. So driving to DQ and driving home does not qualify. But you never see this picture painted. So now David's living in the middle of this. Now he's got consequences on his hands that he wasn't thinking through. He's already got the consequence of a broken relationship with God, damage to other people. Now there's something else in the mix. She's pregnant. Another human life is now in this mix, which is often true of sin. You've brought other people into your consequences. So David's got a plan. Here's his plan to deal with this other new situation. He sends for Bathsheba's husband, who is out fighting on the battlefield, sends for him, hey, come back to Jerusalem and tell me how the battle is going. This is the ruse. David didn't really care. What's he hoping is going to happen? He's hoping Uriah comes home. They have a nice little chat. He sends Uriah home that night to sleep with his wife. So there's no CSI, there's no DNA testing. And the baby's born, and we're like, well, it doesn't really look like Uriah, but he was home that one night. That's David's plan. So Uriah, verse 9, look at this. However, it doesn't work. Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants. He didn't go home. Uriah said to David, the ark in Israel and in Judah are staying in tents. They're out on the battlefield. My commander Joab, my Lord's men are camped in open country. How could I go to my house and eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. So David really is a great man after God's own heart over the span of his lifetime. And in this moment, his actions are one evil step after another, and he's being shown up by Uriah, the average soldier in one of his armies, in terms of his character and his integrity. David is not a good man right now. So David, watching this happen, he's like, uh-oh, now I need a plan B. Here's his plan B. He's going to write a letter to Joab, the commanding officer out in the battlefield. He's going to send this sealed letter with Uriah out to the battlefield. Here's what the plan is. 14:15. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, put Uriah out in the front line where the fighting is the fiercest, then withdraw from him so he'll be struck down and die. So Uriah is actually carrying his own death sentence with him. Like, this is how far this has now escalated, how far David has drifted from God. So I want you to hear this morning, like, whatever you've done in your past, your moral failures, like, they don't disqualify you from becoming an extraordinary person of impact. But at first you have to appreciate the actual damage of your decision. And I want you to see this in here. And the pain that our failures and mistakes and pushing God away and making bad decisions actually do have on people. You can't brush that aside. Verse 16, while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at the place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. And then one of the saddest little sentences in the Bible. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. So Bathsheba, the girl next door, is pregnant. Uriah, her husband, is now dead, and several other innocent men around him, and David is responsible. Oof. You don't want that on your resume. Verse 27, after the time of mourning was over, David had Bathsheba brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. It's probably an understatement. Do you have anything like that in your past where you think back and you're like, oh, can't believe I did that. I can't believe I was thinking that way or wasn't thinking that way, or I can't believe that sucked me in. Like, I can't believe it. So this could be something in your, like we're even talking about this morning, something in your sexual past, adultery or sex outside of marriage, or something even on top, more crazy than that. Maybe some of you have a money past where you did something like you embezzled or you took money or stole money or lied about something. Maybe you have a pornography past where you've fed that lust for years and years and years, and just it kept going and getting deeper and darker, and your friendships got hurt, and maybe you lost your marriage and whatever. Maybe you have a drinking or a drug past where you were addicted to some substance and it sucked you in. And you almost became or did become just powerless. Like the consequences were much longer, much deeper, much darker than you ever thought. You might be sitting here this morning online listening. You have a criminal past where you're like, you go look me up online and I've got a record. And maybe it's not even little stuff. Maybe it's big stuff. And you start telling yourself either like, oh, God could never rescue me. He wants nothing to do with me because of that. Or you play the other tape and go, he might want me back, but I'm just going to be sitting on the sidelines. You might be going, he'd never want me in the game, never want me doing anything important, never want me to become a person of impact or influence. because of that thing. We said that David was king, so he's not exactly ordinary. But if you look at this now on his record, adultery and killing the husband of the woman he committed adultery with, now you could say David is almost less than ordinary. He's on the dark side of ordinary. And yet he's going to still finish being known as a man after God's own heart. He's going to go on being king. He's going to still do some incredible things. Even this did not disqualify him. Now, there's some really important things that are about to follow, but even this didn't disqualify him. No matter who you are, what you've done, God is always sitting. His posture is he's for you. He's waiting to take you back. That's the incredible price Jesus pays for when he dies for us. Like, no matter who you are, what you've done, what's ever in that list, what's ever at the end of your sentence, God could never take me back because God doesn't want to hear that. He's paid for it. And whatever you've done, it never, never, never means you're disqualified from being back in the game in some way. He's got a hope for you. He's got a dream for you. He's got a plan for you. If. There's one if in here. If you are responsive and repentant. If at some point you are humbled to the point of understanding, oh, that's what I did? God, that's what I did. I can't even believe it myself, but I did it. That was me. I made that decision. I followed that path. I went down that road. That was me. And I'm aching. Sorry. Will you rescue me? Take me back. Fix me. Repair me. Mold me. Like that's the beautiful. And David, it takes a year in this case. If you read the rest of the story, it takes a year for David to become responsive and repentant. His friend Nathan eventually gets to him and helps him see what he's done. And he breaks down and surrenders, humbles himself before God. David wrote a lot of the Psalms that are in the Old Testament. Psalm 51 is one of the Psalms he wrote after he had finally understood what he had just done. This is, it reads, this is Psalm 51, a Psalm of David. And he goes on, have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. And in this case, blot out the fact that I have committed adultery and murdered someone. I mean, just let the depth of that soak in. Whew. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin, for I know my transgressions. My sin is always before me. Against you and you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. Cleanse me with hyssop and I'll be clean. Wash me and I'll be whiter than snow. So if you want to become a person who has who's just kind of ordinary, on the dark side of ordinary, who's got a major, significant, or even like secret moral failure in your past, and you want to move to God using you as an extraordinary person of impact, there's no shortcut in here. And it's always through humility and repentance. But there is then life and purpose and impact on the other side. Like God's waiting for you to do that. But first you got to kind of own your own crap. Like I don't care if the porn link just appears on the side of your Facebook page. You got to own your decision. I don't care if being materialistic is normal among the people you know. You got to own your part in it. I don't care if everybody you know is getting drunk and having sex outside of marriage and whatever else is on the list. Like you got to own your crap. God's not going to be asking them about your life. He's going to be asking you. And the way to move from ordinary or the dark side of ordinary to extraordinary is you have to be willing to go, yep, that was me. My bad. I'm sorry. I'm aching over what I did. Repair me, fix me, mold me. So David would continue being king of God's nation. That's incredible grace, making plans to build God's huge temple in Jerusalem, which had never been done before, handing that off to Solomon. It's a crazy story of grace after this. Like, God saw what he actually did, which was massive moral failure. Sin at some of the deepest levels, and yet God's going to take him and use him. I'm sort of weird in that I always have to be working with my hands and doing something. And right now I'm rebuilding a wrecked Jeep Cherokee. Like in 2016, I got it for a few $1,000 from a friend of mine. It was hit hard in the front, so crushed the front, hood, fenders, radiator, all gone. Blew the airbags inside. It's a mess. Smashed the windshield. And probably been working on it for 100 hours. And I saw every little broken part of that thing, like plastic pieces and screws that were missing and oil leaking out. And like I saw everything. And you might be able to understand this, but there's a sense in which when that thing is done, hopefully in a couple of weeks, it's going to be sweeter than new for me. Because I will have known how awful it was and the joy of watching it restored and like, oh, it's back on the road and it's drivable and it works. And that's really similar to God's specialty with human beings, where he's going to take us broken, hurting, wounded, much of that broken and woundedness because of our own mistakes, bad decisions. And he's going to go, oh, I see who you are. Jesus died for that. Everything you've done up to this point, Jesus died to rescue you from that, and then turn around, and I'm going to send you back out into the world. I'm going to be on the way to restoring you, and you're going to go out and join me in what I'm doing in Northeast Ohio. Man, like that's God's dream for us. Like I see how broken and messed up you are, and it's okay. I'm going to take you. I'm going to rescue you. I paid for all of that, and now I'm going to pay to rebuild you and send you back into the game. It's God's specialty. I was praying 2 days ago about this morning and thinking about this. And this list, I'm telling you, had never dawned on me before I was getting ready for this morning. But think about the people in my life who are working somehow significantly for God in the kingdom, in their jobs and out in the world, making impact in churches. Here's my list of, these are just my friends. A guy who was addicted to crack cocaine, a man who served 15 years for sexually abusing his kids, half a dozen people I know who are recovering alcoholics, moms who have had abortions, men and women who cheated on their spouses, people recovering from porn addiction, a guy who used to sell drugs and weapons out of the trunk of his car, and the list could go on and on and on. And these people are not serving on the fringes. Man, they've gone through the process of repenting and humbling, and now, man, they're doing crazy stuff, living on mission, being missionaries, funding major kingdom projects, planting churches. And that list goes on and on and on. Because in God's messed up kind of math, you take a person, an ordinary person like us with baggage and bad decision and moral failures, and you combine that with repentance and humility and God's grace that was paid for by Jesus, you get the most potent kind of impact in the world. It's not just that you'll be okay out in the world making an impact. It's God's going to make you extraordinary because you're this living, breathing example of his grace and forgiveness, and your story's not finished. It's so good. Like, and you watch these people I just mentioned, wherever they are, they're at work and they're out in the community, and like the story is like seeping out of them like, oh, here's what he did for me. You wouldn't believe it. And this is Paul in the New Testament, who wrote most of our New Testament. His story's like that. He's like, oh my gosh, I was the worst. You know what he did before he became a Christian? He murdered Christians. Like, what if that's on your resume? Like, well, God, he saved me, but he probably could never use me because I used to kill these people. And then he's in the game. He's probably the most influential person in God's kingdom in that part of history. And you'll often catch him saying things like, oh, you wouldn't believe I was the worst. And God rescued me. And he didn't just rescue me, he put me back in the game. Oh my. Like I'm a living, breathing example of who God is and what he does and how gracious and forgiving and for us he is. So move from ordinary or even dark side of ordinary to extraordinary. And that's God's dream for us. Ephesians 4:8-9 says, God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things that we have done. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is you're not nearly as good as you think you are. You're much more messed up, twisted, selfish. God, leave me alone. You stiff arm him all the time. Like you're much worse than you probably think you are. So salvation is this gift. So nobody can brag about it. It's a gift from Jesus. You're going to say yes or no to that gift? That's the question. But then look at the verse that follows that many people don't read. They read 8 and 9. They don't read 10. 10 says this: we're God's masterpiece. He's created us anew in Christ Jesus so we could do the good things he planned for us long ago. Those same people he rescued, who had done all kinds of crazy, awful, horrible, even evil things, he rescued. And to you with a past, he says, you're my masterpiece. You're my masterpiece. And I have a life in mind of impact and influence, helping people love God and love other people, helping people win. I want to send you back out in the Northeast Ohio as my masterpiece. Like, wait a minute, I'm a masterpiece? Yeah. God's ability to rebuild you is unbelievable and miraculous. One of the rules around momentum is no perfect people allowed. Have you ever heard that around here? Right? No perfect people allowed. Like that is the dream of like all these people I mentioned who are on mission with God. They're not perfect still, but they're in the process of being rebuilt. They've been repentant and humble, and they're in the game, even though they don't have it all together yet. Somebody said, I think very wisely, Christianity is simply one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. And with that posture, no matter who you are or what you've done, if you're humble, you're saying yes to Christ, yes to God's dream of rebuilding you, he will take you and send you back out to help other beggars find bread. And your story will not just be okay, it will be the thing that God uses to impact the world around you, no matter how awful it is.